Well, let's move on to Pirate Wires. We got a deep dive in the white pill from Thomas Pueyo. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he was actually at Hereticon. He's a big sea flooding guy. I think we've talked about him on the show before. Yeah. He says we should turn Guantanamo Bay into the next Hong Kong. Why the U.S. should use its perpetual lease on Guantanamo Bay to turn it into a special economic zone. This is interesting. There's been a lot of talks about SEZs. Singapore obviously comes to mind.
Yeah.
And Hong Kong is another good example. And so Thomas says, should the U.S. make Canada the 51st state, take over the Panama Canal, co-opt Greenland, appropriate Gaza, and expel over 2 million Gazans to make it the Riviera of the Middle East? All these ideas have been floated recently, but another one is much more feasible. With land the U.S. already has, make Guantanamo into a global capital. Today, Guantanamo Bay bears the scars of colonial ambition, Cold War dread, and global torture, a relic of a bygone era. But there's nothing stopping us from building a new Hong Kong, Dubai, or Singapore there, just a couple hundred miles off the coast of Miami. It could be an international capital of trade, finance, and tourism, a bright city on the bay, and in the process, we could show the Cuban population what capitalism can achieve. This is Guantanamo Bay. Today, it's a military base. The bay has a well-protected deep water port and 2 landing strips for planes. And crucially, it's in the middle of busy sea trade routes. These cities were backwaters not so long ago. Hong Kong was a deep water port surrounded by a communist country, China. By building up the port, urbanizing the surrounding area, making business easy, and minimizing taxes, Hong Kong showed China what capitalism could do by becoming a global port, trading hub, and financial center. Seeing this success, Deng Xiaoping, China's forward-thinking leader in the late 70s and 80s, made the neighboring Shenzhen into a special economic zone, which I've actually been to. It's like insane. Yeah. It's so huge. There's just like 50 story apartment buildings everywhere.
When did you go there, by the way?
2018.
Days?
No,
oh, okay.
it was like a layover on like a vacation, basically.
Cool.
It was just like, I want to go like explore like one random Chinese city for a day. I
gotta tell you, I was going to Bali for a surf trip once, and I had a 20-hour layover in Shanghai.
Yeah.
In like one of those like basically
like
forced airport hotels where you weren't allowed to leave your room. It was a very weird, very weird situation.
We were allowed to leave. We tried to go to Hong Kong on the train, get in a car, tell them to go to the Guangzhou East Railway Station, which would take us on a train to Hong Kong. They take us to the wrong railway station, like the Guangzhou East one instead of the Guangzhou Railway Station or something. We're trying to figure out like, why isn't the train coming to this place? Like, we're really confused. Everyone was staring at us because we're like deep in like a random part of Guangzhou.
My roommate when I studied in China was taller than you.
Yeah, you mentioned this.
Everywhere we went, people would be taking pictures of us. Yeah. Obviously, they if you're even today in huge amounts of China, you might be, if you go out of Shanghai, you might be the first white person
they've
ever seen.
So it's a 6'8" white guy and a blonde, blue-eyed blonde girl like my wife, and we're just walking around like lost. There's people in full-on like hijabs that are like, look at these weirdos. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm in a different place. And so we like it was rough. Like our phones were dying, we were running out of money, couldn't figure out how to do it. Finally, we get on some train, just go back to the hotel, get a hotel, and just sleep for a little bit. But it was a fun experience. And it was a good experience just being like, oh wow, we're like truly lost in a foreign country where we don't speak the language and like cannot understand anything. But it was a good time, and it's a good memory. And so Singapore has a similar story of this. Singapore was expelled from Malaysia. It was not a global hub, but it was in the middle of one of the busiest trade routes in the world. And it capitalized on its location by building a port, reducing taxes, and then expanding services. Dubai is an even more recent example of the same recipe. Can we do the same with Guantanamo? 3 factors can help make this happen. First, many of the most successful cities start as military outposts, which provide security, infrastructure, and demand for services to kickstart the local economy. The U.S. is basically the Guantanamo Bay's anchor tenant right now. Second, Guantanamo Bay could also become a trading hub thanks to its deep water port in the middle of shipping lanes. And the Jones Act requires ships carrying passengers or goods between U.S. ports to be made in the U.S., flagged by the U.S., and crewed by U.S. citizens. This is useful to ensure the U.S. has a navy in times of war, as it would keep its shipbuilding facilities. And so third, Guantanamo City would have a deep pool of workers, Cubans. This is an amazing deal on every side. Guantanamo would benefit from the millions of highly educated potential workers. It's better for Cubans than sailing to Florida. Competitively, Cuba would experience a brain drain. Capitalism's benefits would be evident as infrastructure could be seen from Cuban soil. And Cuba could follow suit by developing its own half of the bay. Making Guantanamo into a special economic zone would be similar to what happened in Dubai, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Singapore. So very, very fun. U.S. has a perpetual lease.
It's cool. In Dubai, it's cool. Some of these special economic zones are basically one tower.
Yeah.
So you can just get in the middle of
no
in the middle of the UAE. You can basically get an office that's not technically that's equivalent to being international waters.
Yeah.
And it's just like you just walk into the building.
Yeah. So he closes by saying, America can boldly reinterpret what's possible. Imagine transforming Guantanamo Bay from a relic of the past into a dazzling epicenter of global trade and innovation, a Hong Kong or Singapore for the Caribbean, a shining example of what audacious vision can achieve, a beacon of hope, capitalism and democracy for the hungry Cuban masses. If America wants to think big, this could be its first step. I love that. I think that's a really fun article. So go subscribe to Pirate Wires. We're big fans.
The island, Guantanamo is going to need some major feng shui treatments to get it sort of conducive to, positivity and building. And currently it's.
I want to know how Guantanamo Bay actually benchmarks against Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong in terms of just land footprint.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Singapore's small. Like you can walk from like one part of downtown to the other. You can drive the whole island in like a day. But when I think Guantanamo Bay, I think literally just like one prison and like a landing strip.
Yeah.
But maybe there's more. Maybe the lease is actually pretty big. We got to dig into it. But I hope this turns into a meme, and we're seeing it on the timeline constantly because it seems like a cool idea.
It's funny. It's the same idea. It's the same idea as Greenland or the moon.
Yep.
But
we already
it's
have
so much more achievable.
Yeah, of course. It's not even
so
a
it's like
negotiation.
not even as exciting necessarily, but cool idea.